Hereby, I open this academic ceremony in which Yikang Zhang will defend the academic thesis, Make Believe the Role of Memory Distrust in the Memory Validation Process. Welcome to you all, also welcome to the co-supervisor who is online present with us today. And I will start with inviting you to present a summary of the results of your studies, please.
Thank you. Highly esteemed pro-rector, members of the opposition, supervisors, colleagues, friends, and family, thank you for joining me here for the defense of my dissertation titled Make Believe, the Role of Memory Distrust in the Memory Validation Process. In the next 15 minutes, I will briefly introduce the research included in this dissertation. Specifically, I will first introduce the key concepts, the research questions, followed by the research methodology and the main findings. Then in the end, I will briefly summarize the theoretical and the practical implications of this research line. So, what did you have for breakfast today? Suppose that you are a breakfast person like me. This question would have conjured up certain sensations and images. For example, the smell of morning coffee accompanied by the breakfast of your choice, be it savory or sweet, or both if you swing both ways. It's likely that accompanying these sensations and images is the belief that the remembered breakfast indeed happened. This is what we memory researchers call a believed memory. Hearing this, you might wonder, is all scientists do just to make simple things sound more complicated? Why don't you just call it a memory? To answer the first question, yes, sometimes. As for the second question, the reason is that the recollection, that is the mental experiencing of event, and the belief in the occurrence of event are two different things. Although retrieved memories, like the breakfast memory, often comprises both a vivid sense of recollection and a strong belief that the event indeed happened, that's not always the case. In some situations, people can have a strong belief in the occurrence of an event, but have no recollection of it. For example, the celebration of your first birthday is often believed, but not remembered or recollected. And if you do have a recollection of that event, it's probably a false memory due to a mental simulation or imagination. Conversely, sometimes people can have vivid recollections of event, but do not believe in the occurrence of the event. That's something we call a non-believed memory. So how do we make sense of these different types of mental event representations? Researchers suggest that we need to see remembering as a process involving different stages of decision-making. First, either through internal processes or external cues, memory traces are activated and turns into memory information, which we can access. Then in the second stage, the validity of that memory is inferred from both the retrieved internal information and external information, for example, your general beliefs, photos, discussions with family and friends, to form a memory belief, that is, to decide what has happened in the past. Then in the final stage, the communication stage, the rememberer decides whether or not to communicate and how to communicate the memory to other people. If you do believe that sharing this memory would negatively impact your relationship with someone, you may want to hold that to yourself. Though my mom never shied away from sharing my embarrassing stories growing up. As suggested in the title, my research question focuses on the second stage, the validation stage. Specifically, I ask, how does memory distrust influence the memory validation process? So what is memory distrust? Memory distrust was first coined to describe a phenomenon that, as a result of suggestive questioning during police interrogations, people start to develop profound distrust toward their memories, which in some cases leads to false confessions or even wrongful convictions. The experience of sometimes finding it difficult to trust one's memory, however, is widely shared, and definitely not only restricted to the interrogation room. Therefore, researchers extended this concept to describe how people think of their memory functioning in general or at a certain moment. This appraisal consists of two aspects: distrust toward making omission errors For example, forgetting certain details of past experience, and distrust toward making commission errors. For example, misremembering things that did not happen or happened in a different way, or confusing dreamed content with reality, or in nowadays, probably confusing Netflix with reality. So it has been shown that people with high memory distrust are more likely to incorporate misleading information from other people's accounts into their own memory into their own memories. So suggesting that it indeed plays a role in the validation process. However, there are also other researchers suggest a null result. To establish the link with confidence, the following questions need to be answered. First, what is the relationship between memory distrust and belief judgments? Second, how does memory distrust moderate the relationship between recollection judgments and belief judgments? And finally, how does memory distrust interact with contradicting social information to reshape our beliefs? How does memory distrust influence the acceptance of misinformation? My co-authors and I try to address these questions in the dissertation. In this talk, I will briefly summarize the research reported in Chapter 4 and 5. So, to continue with our breakfast memory, how does memory distrust influence the memory of that time you had breakfast by yourself? In Chapter 4, I try to find the answer to this question. In this longitudinal study, 234 participants studied pictorial stimuli and were tested on some of these stimuli during the same session, but were tested on other stimuli 1 day, 2 days, 4 days, 8 days, and 17 days later. In each memory test, participants were asked 3 questions: whether or not the scene was presented in session 1, yes or no, and their sense of recollection of seeing that scene in the session 1, and finally, their belief about whether or not the scene was presented in session 1, regardless of their memory. And here are the results. What we found is that the discrepancy between recollection judgment and belief judgment were higher or were larger for memory distrusters, people who are more distrustful toward their memory than memory trusters. Another way of looking at the data is to see the correlation between recollection judgment and the belief judgment. Although in both groups, these two judgments are highly correlated, the correlation coefficient in the memory distruster group is significantly smaller than the one in memory truster group. So it appears that among us, people who are more distrustful toward their memory functioning are less likely to rely on their recollection to decide on what has happened in the past. They are less likely to think that they had a lovely breakfast, even though the image of the croissant is just as vivid and the smell of coffee just as seductive. But we do not always eat alone, do we? At least I hope not. So what happens to our memory of breakfast with friends and family when we reminisce together later? And what's the role of memory distrust in it? In Chapter 5, we can look for the answers. In this study, participants imagined that they were at a party or a festival, and in this activity, they witnessed an incident during which someone was severely hurt and taken to the hospital. And then they were asked to further imagine that a few weeks later, they were talking to the friend who co-witnessed the incident, and the friend confronted them that saying, "Oh, you remembered incorrectly. Things did not happen that way." And they needed to list 5 strategies to verify their memory. And then they rated the strategies in terms of cost, reliability, and likelihood of using that strategy. Cost here is defined as to the extent to which the strategy requires effort, time, money, labor, etc. And reliability is defined as the likelihood that the information gained of using that strategy is reliable, indisputable, and accurate. Finally, we measure their memory distrust levels. So here are the results. First, we replicated a finding named the cheap and easy strategy bias. As shown in the figures, strategy cost was negatively associated with the likelihood to use, and reliability ratings are positively associated with likelihood to use. And more importantly, we see that the regression slope is steeper for cost than for reliability, which means cost plays a more decisive role in deciding which strategy we would adopt eventually. Then we look at the cheap and easy strategy bias for memory trusters and memory distrusters. On the left side, we see the decisions of memory distrusters are more influenced by the cost compared to the decisions of trusters, as indexed by the steeper regression coefficient. On the right side, we see the opposite pattern. The decisions of trusters are more influenced by the reliability of a strategy than the decisions of distrusters. So this suggests that the cheap and easy strategy bias is greater among the group of memory distrusters. So how do we make sense of this difference? I look at the group difference in terms of adopted reliable strategies. I define a reliable strategy as a strategy with reliability rating with 6 or 7 on a 7-point scale. And I assume that with a likelihood of 6 or 7 on a 7-point scale, people would eventually use this strategy in real life, because here we have a hypothetical scenario. So the analysis showed that on average, memory trusters adopted 1.9 reliable strategy, while memory distrusters adopted 1.2 reliable strategy. That's a raw score difference of 0.7. And if we are looking at the relative terms, it seems that memory distrusters invested around 1/3 less effort to verify their memories, therefore possibly exposing themselves to greater risk of accepting misinformation. In later chapters, I also show that when actually confronted that their memory are wrong, memory distrusters are more likely to reduce their belief and change their answers in subsequent memory tests. It seems that memory distrusters are more likely to be persuaded that they misremembered the breakfast together when being confronted by their friends. Assuming that people are more likely to engage in heuristic processing, that is automatic, and in the absence of contradicting information, and more likely to engage in systematic processing when being confronted with the possibility of erroneous memory. Here I show that memory distrust influences the validation outcome in both heuristic and systematic ways. As for the practical relevance, in many situations, the changes in beliefs is inconsequential. However, in forensic settings where the completeness and accuracy of a memory report is crucial, memory reporting errors can lead to severe consequences. Research has shown that faulty eyewitness identification statements are involved in 63% of wrongful convictions, and false confessions are involved in 28% of wrongful convictions. Eyewitnesses, suspects who are more distrustful toward their memories may give less credence to their memory, make more memory errors in their reporting, even in the absence of contradicting information. And when actually being confronted, they are less likely to invest effort to verify their memory and are more readily to accept what other people are telling them, therefore risking giving erroneous statements. Therefore, it could be proven useful that for expert witnesses to evaluate these people's memory distrust level when assessing the validity of their statements. Oh, sorry. Thank you for listening. I give the floor back to the prorector.
Thank you for this presentation. We will now start with the defense, and the opposition will be opened by the chair of the assessment committee, that is Professor Dr. Peter Muris, Professor of Developmental Psychopathology at the Psychology and Neuroscience faculty here in Maastricht.
Thank you. Dear candidate, first of all, I have to give you a lot of compliments. Not only for the thesis, because I was already really impressed by the thesis. It was really easy for me as a chair to approve this thesis to be defended today, because almost all the papers were already published. Also, I look at the back of your thesis, I see that you published many more papers. When I graduated as a PhD, I had 16 publications. I was really proud of this, but you beat me with this one. I counted already 22 or 23 papers, so that is really an amazing job. I want to compliment you and also the promotion team with this great effort. Okay? So this weekend, I have to say, I remember very well that I was preparing to find a question to ask today. But I was also, I have to say, I was also reading a novel, a book. And this book was 1Q84 by a Japanese writer, Murakami. And while reading, I've almost finished the third part of this book. I don't know whether you know it. You know the book?
Highly esteemed opponent. I think I heard about the name, but I don't think I've read it.
Okay, don't bother, because I bought you the book. I will give you the book. It's in English later on. Yes?
Thank you.
Don't bother. So I was reading this book, and it's about two persons, a man and a woman. And the woman is named Aomame, and the man is called Tango. And they travel between the real world and a sort of a fantasy world. And at the passage, the entrance of the fantasy world, there is a billboard, an Esso billboard. Esso is a petrol station where you can fill your car with petrol. And the main advertisement they use is a tiger. So I will read you now first a small part of the Roman. Aomame was struck by a sudden thought. Something was different, but she couldn't put her finger on it. She narrowed her eyes and focused, and then it hit her. The left side of the Esso's tiger's face was toward them, but in her memory, it was his right side that had faced the world. The tiger had been reversed. Her face instinctively grimaced. Her heart skipped a beat or two. It felt like something inside her had changed course. But could she really say for sure? Is my memory really that accurate? Aomame wasn't certain. She just had the feeling about it, and sometimes our memory betrays us. Okay, so when I read this, I thought, well, is this a coincidence? I have to ask a question about memory, and this is what the whole thesis is about. So that's why I bought you the book, and you have to read it. My question, because I also have to be more critical and say, okay, let's challenge the candidate a little bit. So I was thinking about memory, and I always, when I was raised as a psychologist, I was taught the model of Baddeley. What goes in your memory must come out. I know you have more focus on the validation process, but what is not in the memory cannot come out. So I was thinking about, what about cognitive processes that are underlying the formation of the memory? Because if I have poor cognitive processes, such as when I compare myself to my friend, I know what I had for breakfast today. It was cornflakes, of course. Cornflakes, the regular version, because sometimes we have all bran, but today it was the regular version. I had some orange juice with it and a cup of coffee. But if you would ask my friend, she would not remember, because she is not paying attention all the time. I think she has a sort of ADD or ADHD, but she's not paying attention, and so she does not know the memory. So she has more memory distrust than I have. But that is because the cognitive processes are functioning in a different way. So my question then is, what about these ideas? Do you agree with me that cognitive processes can vary? And then my question also is, when I look at your studies, I wonder about how comparable are your studies in terms of these individual differences in cognitive processes? Do the effects that you find in the thesis, in your research, do you agree with me that you had to check in some way for the functioning of the cognitive processes? I think in chapter 2 you show that self-reported cognitive functioning was the strongest correlate of your memory distrust score. So there was a clear negative association. But then, if you take that seriously, why didn't you check in all the papers what were these people's levels of cognitive functioning, and shouldn't you have controlled for this variable? So that is basically my question.
Thank you, highly esteemed opponent. As for why I have so many publications, I think that need to be credited to gay speed, and it's not only me, and gay speed does not discriminate, and I think we all know who is sitting there have the severest symptom. As for the appraisal of one's memory.
Sorry, what is this? Who is this? You mean Henry?
Yeah, the one without hair.
Ah, okay, I didn't understand. Okay, yes. Continue.
As for the influence between cognitive processes, for example, objective memory functioning, and on top of that, the appraisal or the second-order belief about our own memory function, I think both these are both valid mechanisms influencing the memory reporting. Some people, they have worse memory functioning, so they remember less, and then make more omission errors in the report. But also, you may realize that you often forget things. So you're not very confident about your memory, and you intentionally omit certain details that you are not very confident about. And I think in my studies, I focused on the belief, and I didn't really look into how to disentangle these two aspects. But I think one possible way is to manipulate memory distrust. I think this has already been done by another member in the Corona. And currently we have a registry report, also reviewed by the member of the Corona, that we try to manipulate memory distrust to see if this belief alone can influence, for example, response criteria in memory reporting. I hope that answered your question.
I'm not sure you're going to into the belief, but I'm not sure whether I want to head into the belief. I just want that if your cognitive processes do not operate in a good way, for example, if you don't pay attention to your cornflakes when you eat them, then later on you will also, when you would ask me what did you eat this morning, there is no answer because I didn't pay attention at all. I was just reading the newspaper or whatever, but I didn't pay attention to my food. And this is what I say, okay, the belief will not be there because there is no memory, right? So there is little memory maybe. So this is basically, when I thought, for example, in one paper you say you had many student samples, but there was also one community-based sample. I think it was an online survey in which you looked, for example, at educational levels. Mm-hmm. So maybe this could have been a way to look at people, because I would also say if you are highly intelligent, maybe you also have a good cognitive functioning brain, then maybe the memory distrust will also be not that big. You understand what I mean?
Given the time, short answer, please.
I think the memory reporting can be influenced by objective cognitive functioning, but it's unlikely the only major factor. Also, people with lower cognitive functioning, they can also rely on certain behavioral scripts to reaffirm their experience or their memory. If you are eating cornflakes every day, it doesn't really matter whether or not you're smart or not. You will remember, or you will have a strong belief what you had for breakfast, right? And So I don't really see it as a major confound of my research, but I do believe there are at least moderate association between objective appraisal and the subjective appraisal and objective memory functioning, and I think that's also shown in the chapter 4 in my studies. We found that people who think they often make omission errors indeed make more omission errors in the memory tests, and the same is for the distrust toward commission errors. But it's unlikely to be a major confound, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You may continue the discussion maybe at the drinks later today. So the opposition will now be continued by Professor Dr. Romuald Polczyk from Jagiellonian University, all the way from Poland. We are really happy that you are here with us in Maastricht. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Dear candidate, I also want to start with compliments. I was really impressed by your work, by your papers included in your thesis, but also by the papers, the other papers. I must confess I haven't read them all yet, but they are certainly on my list. So please accept my compliments. As for my question, I would like to ask you about the possible impact of demand characteristics on your results. I mean, not all, but many of your experiments, not only yours, include a detailed explanation given to the participants what actually non-believed memories are. Okay, and I wonder whether this explanation may just create some non-believed memories in the participant, who never thought that it is possible to have a memory and to not trust this memory, but after being given an explanation that it is perfectly possible, they may start to reflect, and some of the participants may come to the conclusion that actually yes, perhaps I do have some memories which I don't believe. Okay, so briefly stated, how do you think whether it is possible that this detailed explanation, the definition, what non-believed memories are, may contribute to create some non-believed memories which didn't exist before this explanation? Thank you.
Thank you, highly esteemed opponent. I agree that demand characteristics can be an important issue to consider in the research in memory, not only non-believed memories. Memory cues or the instructions for recall heavily influences the content we recall. As for the severity of this issue, I think it depends on the methodology. In chapter 2, where we only ask participants to give the frequency of non-believed memories, I think this risk is higher because we didn't ask participants to give a description of the memory, the content of the memory, so we cannot check. And for in chapter 3, we ask participants to write down the memory content, so we have some kind of quality control. And in chapter 4, we used the recognition task and asked participants to rate recollection ratings and belief ratings to see the recollection belief discrepancy and to operationalize non-believed memory. In that case, I think the risk is the lowest. But also, I think the change of belief is very flexible and is very common. And if you give participants a prompt that promotes them to rethink a past experience, and then it creates doubt to that experience and they stop believing about the experience, I think that is still a valid non-believed memory. Simply because it's induced by demand characteristics doesn't mean it's not a valid non-believed memory. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. The opposition will now be continued by Dr. Anna Sagana. She is an expert on eyewitness identification at the Faculty of Psychology and Neuroscience here in Maastricht.
Thank you, Rector. Dear candidate, let me also start by congratulating you and your promotion team here in the room and online for this beautiful piece of work that we have in front of us. I mean, its sheer length, but also its quality reflects the quality of the researcher that you are and your hard work. But today I also want to start with two confessions. I have to confess two things to you. The first is that when I receive a printed version of a thesis, I always open it to the acknowledgements. That's the very first thing I do. Maybe because I'm gossipy, maybe because I'm a psychologist and I want to see and learn more about the person I'm reading the work of. And I did the very same thing with your work. But I didn't expect that I would be so touched by your acknowledgements. And I was touched because of the very last paragraph. Would you mind reading this last paragraph from your acknowledgements?
In the end, I wish to dedicate the thesis to all first-gen researchers, present and future. We share the experiences of doubt, insecurity, and alienation, but also curiosity, excitement, and camaraderie. Thank you.
So, as a first-generation researcher myself, as a first-generation university graduate myself, I was truly touched by this, dedicating this to us. I could see myself in everything that you wrote there. And I would just to share with you that I think all of us first-generation researchers are very proud to have a member like you amongst us. That's the first confession I have to make today. The second confession I have to make is that the second thing I do when I take a thesis is that I turn into the publications. It is an old, nasty habit. I think I am in good company among others here, but it is a leftover before the recognition and rewards kind of movement. It is annoying, it's hard to stop it, but I still do it. So turning in your publication record, I noticed that you are very diverse in the topics that you investigate. So you started by in-group favoritism, I think, in doing research. You moved into child sexual abuse. You did a PhD on memory, what we have here. I know that you received a grant on researching dating apps and sexuality, and you also declare an interest in the relationship between social capital and pro-social behavior. This to me feel all unconnected. So I'm really curious. What is the common thread? What is the glue in all this for you, if there is any?
Thank you, esteemed opponent. I think the common glue is just me. I have a quite diverse collection of research interests. So to make it easier for me, I can just tell the audience why I did these kind of things. So I started my research master in Shanghai, studying decision-making with a focus on intergroup relations and cooperation. And I tried to utilize some open data to study the determinants of pro-social behavior. And I was reading Pierre Bourdieu about the critical theory about social capital, basically how different capitals change into one another and, in a sense, promote the continuation of a societal structure. So I feel like certain pro-social practices are just like, they belong to a certain class. For example, donation, volunteering, they are very middle class to me, and I'm not from that environment, so I can notice that. So I think maybe then I can run some analysis on that. And that's why I have the social capital paper, and it's more sociology than psychology. And then for my master thesis, I did a series of experiments on intergroup relations, because that's where the lab I'm in. And in my third year, I was working with Pankaj Santila at MIU Shanghai, and he's a professor of legal psychology, but also a professor of human sexuality. So basically, he is responsible for who I am now, as you can see. We worked on some research lines about child sexual abuse interview training and some more fundamental research on how cognitive biases manifest itself in these interviews. And I'm also involved in his research line in human sexuality. Specifically, one of his PhD students, his PhD work is on sexual disgust and sexual arousal. So I was his research assistant and we were good friends, so we have a few publications there. And then I moved to Maastricht for my PhD together with Henry and others. And here we have a memory lab, and that's, the recent publications are about memory. I would say, I think it's important to have a diverse research interest, so you can draw different inspirations from adjacent disciplines. Also, I think it keeps me humble because I still feel like there are so many things I don't know. I'm always fascinated by reading new papers. I think I shared to you one paper yesterday, so you should know that. Yeah, so that's all. That's my journey. Thank you.
Okay, I guess, yeah. I guess we can talk about the paper during drinks, and I guess now I understand a little bit better your proposition number 8 about disciplinarity and why not staying true to one discipline is being a problem. Okay, all right. But now turning a little bit more to the content of the dissertation. Yeah, my role here is not just to give you compliments, but also to challenge you a little bit, and I would like to challenge you on chapter 2 and 3 and a little bit on chapter 7. And more generally, I'm curious why in this line of work, in general, memory distrust, but also in your particular work, you rarely ask participants to give, for example, a free recall and measure their actual recollection without any influences like false feedback or anything like that. Instead, participants are consistently asked to rate how they think they are performing rather than measuring their actual performance. That's sometimes done also in your work, as for example in chapter 2. But if I look closer in the data there on the actual performance, not the perceived performance, then I get a different picture. So I would like first to ask you to explain to us why, what is the rationale of this choice, that you rarely check the actual memory performance?
In chapter 2 and 3, we did not measure memory performance, if I remember it correctly. I think we used survey studies to ask participants to report the frequency of certain memory phenomena, and we didn't include any standardized memory tests. In chapter 7, we have a recognition task where participants need to recognize whether or not a face was presented in a previous session. And the focus is, for chapter 2 and 3, because we don't have a memory test, we couldn't really see the association between subjective judgment and a memory test. For the chapter 7, we are focusing on how this subjective appraisal influences their acceptance of misinformation or contradicting social information to their memory. So we always picked their correct memory responses and challenged them on these responses to see if they would change their answers later.
Yeah, but that's exactly my question. Why do you never measure the actual memory performance? Isn't this the more relevant thing? If, for example, a person with memory distrust would recollect less, not if they think, they believe they would recollect less, but if they truly recollect less. And you are right, it's my mistake, I think it was in chapter 4 or table 4.5, there that you actually measured performance. And if memory serves me right, and my notes serve me right, distrust had either no effect or a small effect on actual recognition on old items. And when, for the new items, so they had studied a list of items, and for the new items that they had not studied, it seems that people just become a little bit more conservative. And that could even be arguably a good thing, that they became more conservative in offering information that they haven't seen, so making commission errors or refraining from making giving information that they are not sure about. So I'm curious indeed why you don't really measure performance, and even if all these findings are as bad as depicted to be, is it really that bad to have this distrust, even if it doesn't affect so much the actual performance, and if the way it affects it is to make you a little bit more conservative in your responding, so you don't provide inaccuracies or inaccurate information?
Yes, in chapter 4 we measured objective memory performance. So in chapter 4, participants were given a series of memory tests where we can measure their recognition rates, and we found that the two aspects of memory distrust are related to different patterns of reporting errors. Memory distrust toward making omission errors is associated with actually making more omission errors. So people who think they often forget actually made more miss in the recognition task, and people who often think they misremember things that did not happen made more false alarms. So that's, in that sense, this subjective appraisal is associated with objective memory functioning, but still here we are not really measuring recollection, right? We're measuring a reporting of recollection or reporting of a memory. And here still is a judgment, is a reflection on, or like a judgment based on the actual information, memory information we cannot see, we cannot really see in the data set, if something happens here. And so also, I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Partly. I still find it difficult to comprehend why you're not interested in looking how they actually perform. But like also for the practical relevance, if it doesn't affect the actual performance, why would I care as a police officer if someone distrusts their memory, put it simply? Why should I bother if it doesn't affect their actual performance?
I think that's in the title of the dissertation, make-believe, right? We create false beliefs, and these false beliefs will have real-life consequences. For example, if you believe you have drank alcohol, then you will probably be less confident in your memory functioning, and you're more likely to accept misinformation from others. And if you believe in the controversial topic of repressed memory, maybe you are more likely to generate or form a false memory of child abuse and later go to the police and report family members. And that's why beliefs are also very important. And that's the focus of this dissertation, how beliefs like memory distrust, but also various other types of beliefs can influence memory reporting. Thank you.
You're satisfied?
Thank you, yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the opposition will be continued by Professor Dr. Jan Raamakers, Professor Psychopharmacology at the Psychology and Neuroscience faculty here in Maastricht.
Thank you very much. I would also like to start with my compliments to you and your work, and also your promotion team, of course. For the reasons that have already been mentioned, maybe in addition I could say that you seem to have strong interest and skills in designing studies and also doing the statistical analysis. And you make beautiful figures, you really do. What I would like to focus on is this term non-believed memories, maybe in particular to chapter 3, where you study the association between memory distrust or self-esteem and non-believed memories. So I was thinking by myself, so what are these non-believed memories? It's not a concept that comes by on my day-to-day operations, I must admit. So I was trying to think back of a memory I don't believe. I found it pretty tough. Today I had a memory of me crashing my car a little bit, which I cannot believe, but I know it's true. So that doesn't qualify either. But yeah, so they are rare, and I think I also came to the conclusion when reading your chapter 3, right? Because there you have a design, a longitudinal design, where you have your participants rate their memories, and also rate whether they exist and occur or not in a baseline period of 4 weeks, and then you follow them over time. And each week, for 3 times in a row, you follow the occurrence of non-believed memories and try to associate them to the levels of memory distrust that these individuals have. So the first question I have is, why did you actually choose that longitudinal design? Because I couldn't actually find a rationale for doing that in your thesis. I presume that you wanted to follow whether the memory distrust changed over time, or whether these, or based on that, the non-belief memories increased. So what were you actually expecting out of that longitudinal design? That would be my first question.
Thank you, highly esteemed opponent, for the compliment and for the question. I think with the longitudinal design, we can start to discuss individual differences. For example, if we see some people consistently report higher numbers of non-belief memories across weeks, then we can, while others consistently report lower numbers of non-belief memories, then we can say there is a great individual difference in this phenomenon. And I think previous to this paper, there was one paper published by Scorbore and colleagues, and they used a different task where they challenged participants' recognition memories, and they found that some participants often defend their memories, others often relinquish their belief in their memories. So it's a different methodology to study individual differences in non-belief memories.
Okay, I understand. Also then you would be interested in stability over time of that phenomena, right?
Yes.
So when I look at the number of occurrences at baseline, where you actually found an association, right, between non-belief memories and memory distrust and self-esteem, the mean occurrence rate was 3.17, and at the median reported non-belief memories were 2. So if you borrow that down to a week, we're talking about 0.5 and 0.25 non-belief memories on average. And if we look at the percentage of participants that actually reported a non-belief memory, that's about 20 to 40% or so. So many had none, and particularly in the follow-up weeks, the first, second, and third week, there were hardly any non-belief memory. So I'm not surprised that in these follow-up weeks you don't find an association at all between self-esteem or memory trust and non-believed memories. So to me, I think you're totally underpowered, because you can only study an event when the event actually occurs, but it wasn't occurring in time frames that you were looking at them. Would you agree with that observation?
Thank you, highly esteemed opponent. Yes, I agree that the results can be due to a floor effect, that there is not enough distribution for us to find a reliable association between memory distrust and the number of non-belief memories reported in later weeks. But also, we discussed in the paper, the recall process in the later weeks are also different from the first week, because the participants are primed to notice on this phenomena. And then maybe due to this reason, we also don't find association, because there's heightened sensitivity toward non-belief memories or belief change. Mm-hmm. And I think studying memory can be tricky, because all the different ways of recalling or instructing participants to recall a memory can influence the content being recalled. And so I feel like I prefer to work with different experimental methods or approaches to see if we can find consistent results. And then that's why then I think I'm more confident in the conclusions. If we single out chapter 2 or 3, or maybe later chapters, and say, is this good enough for us to have a strong conclusion? I don't think.
Yeah, but you could also have stayed at chapter 3. For example, you could have decided, maybe you did it, to pool the data in week 1, so in the first follow-up, second week follow-up, and the third follow-up, pool them as one period, and compare and then look for the association that you're looking for, and then compare it to placebo. Because then you would have about comparable time frames, like 2 weeks versus 3 weeks. The event would be comparable too, and then maybe this would be a way to sort of repeat the finding or replicate the finding that you found in the baseline. Did you ever do that?
If I didn't report it in the thesis, then I don't think I've done it. But it's a very good suggestion. But still, with that adjusted analysis, the 2 times the recall are still different, right? Because one is recalled without this sensitivity. Also, like if we collapse all the later measures, they are like weekly measures, and then it's still not the same process as the first measure. I'm not even sure if it is valid if we just add the numbers.
I'm not sure either, but I think my time is about up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, then we go to our last opponent. I'm really happy that you made it. Professor Corine de Ruiter, Professor of Forensic Psychology at the Faculty of Psychology and Neuroscience, Maastricht University.
Thank you, Madam Pro-Rector, and my apologies for being late, but I have a very believable memory of what happened this afternoon, and that is my train got stuck somewhere between Utrecht and Den Bosch, and the person in charge, the driver, said, yeah, I don't know what's going on. Apparently all the computers are down in Utrecht, so I don't know how long this is going to take. Well, it took a long time, so that's why I was late. Dear candidate, congratulations on the completion of your thesis, which contains a set of highly structured empirical studies, and I think you are really on top of the whole topic of memory distrust and the role it plays as a trait variable in the occurrence of both non-believed memories and also false memory formation. You've been highly successful in getting your work published, not only this work, but also other work, as my colleague already alluded to. So I want to congratulate you on this work and also include your supervisory team in this. But I've not been asked here today to just give you compliments. Of course, I have also prepared a few questions. So now, you know me, of course, and I'm not a lab study person. I'm a real-world study person. You're a lab study person. You like to do studies where you have complete control over the variables you are wanting to manipulate. And I know that's nice as an experimenter, but that's not the way the real world works, and it's definitely not the case in the context of crime investigation or court trials. So in your general discussion, I was, of course, very curious to see what you were going to say about the practical implications of your work, as this is required these days, of course. So on page 187, you write, therefore, accurately assessing eyewitness and/or suspects' memory distrust level by expert witnesses could be proven useful in statement validity assessment. Wow, that's a mouthful. But I was kind of disappointed, of course, because that's a rather general remark, and it's also not very practical, I think. So I'm sure you've heard of G to I inferences in expert witness testimony. So we scientists, we always do group studies, but the court and the police work with single case studies. So how are we going to resolve that discrepancy? How are we going to translate the group level findings to the individual case? So I need your help because I'm now an expert witness. I'm called to the court and I have your dissertation. So what should I do? You know, how should I use your research findings in my expert testimony for the court? What measure of memory distrust should I use? You used several. What's the appropriate cutoff that I should use to determine if this eyewitness has serious problems with memory distrust? What are the implications for statement validity? So these are my first two questions. I have a few more, but I think these are already quite complicated.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question, a very thoughtful question, very difficult question. If you don't know how to do that, I think for me, a person without any clinical training, I wouldn't know how to do that either. But I do feel like starting with the scales to measure eyewitnesses' memory distrust level is the first step. But also, I think as a clinical psychologist or other kinds of professional, the quality of assessment of a witness or suspect's memory distrust is also needed, and it will be very individualized, or it should be very much individualized. And as for the G to I problem, I think that's an even bigger question. I don't have the knowledge nor the resources to solve that, and that's not only restricted to research on memory distrust, but also all other areas of psychological research, even beyond psychology. For example, in eyewitness identification, there are certain individual differences or situational factors can influence the accuracy, but it's only based on group level data, and we cannot extrapolate that to an individual case. And then expert witness cannot really say anything about the individual case. They can only provide some general knowledge. And I think that's definitely a research area need to be explored with priority. And I know that some of my mentors are thinking about how to tackle that problem, but it's not my place to share their ideas. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Okay, well, you sort of answered my question, but if you're saying that your work is important for practice, and you're saying, yeah, there should be more research on this, how would you plan such research? Like, you did these lab studies, you're actually making inferences towards practical implications, and you're saying, well, it's kind of too early, but what would you do? What would be your next step if you want to make an impact on practice?
As a experimentalist, I think I would still continue with experimental research, more fundamental research. Henry previously has a paper on what expert witness can say in the courtroom. They proposed 3 criteria: replicability, generalizability, and practical relevance. I think the studies reported in the thesis are still need to be replicated, and that's the first step. And we need to better understand the mechanisms of how certain beliefs influence the validation process, influence the reporting, and then we could move to the application of the research. And for that one, I don't think I have the skills to conduct qualitative research, at least not at this moment. So I would suggest maybe people with a clinical background and with a qualitative analysis background, they could carry on with this research, with interviews with, how do we say, ordinary population, and then people who are more vulnerable, and to see how they think of these situations and the phenomenon. And I think that would be the start. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yikang Zhang, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense. I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberations and our return in this room.
All right, please.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
To the west side, no place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. I know what's on the line. I know you know that I can't read your mind. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like, my goal's only getting clearer. East side to the west side, no place like home. If there's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. Traveling so far from home, gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. It's a better future than we're going for. Even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you won the battle once you grow. Southside, 10 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like, my goal's only getting clearer. East side to the west side, no place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like, my goal's only getting clearer. East side to the west side, no place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile.
Yikang Zhang, the degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense. And in view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Otgaar is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. And I invite your supervisor to now take the floor.
All right, please.
Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
Yes, I promise.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Yikang Zhang, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university. Okay. Dear Dr. Zhang, dear Yikang, together with Marco and also Jane in China, I'm truly honored to congratulate you with your doctorate. You really underwent a fantastic PhD journey, and the words that I will say now will never be enough to show what a great person, but also researcher you are. Before I start with the rest of this audacia, I want to start with a poem, and I'll explain later why I read this specific poem. I, with my lantern, traveled the ancient paths alone. Memories flood back to me of those who journeyed here before. The river surges with past sorrows. The moon shines on old memories. How many times have travelers watched the same river and moon? Do you remember who this poem was? Memory Distrust. No, it's okay. This poem was written by the Chinese poet Li Bai. You already know? Yes, who lived between the years 701, 762, is also known as the immortal poet. And you might wonder why I chose to start with a poem from a Chinese poet. And there are several reasons for this. First, in your own publications, I'm not sure people have seen this, you sometimes start with poems, such as the one by Thomas Hood. And I know you like to read poetry yourself. Second, I remember that when you just started with your PhD, we had a meeting talking about philosophy, philosophers, poets, and we were interested in whether there were any Chinese or Asian philosophers or poets writing about a core theme of your PhD, which is memory. And third, maybe least important, Li Bai, he was not only a great poet, he allegedly was a great swordsman, which I personally like. And finally, most important, the poet I just read provides an accurate reflection, I think, of your specific PhD project. So your PhD project, as many have seen now, was about the relation between memory distrust and memory validation. You were interested in issues such as memory distrust and whether this is linked to accepting misinformation and suggestion, and whether it might be linked to false memories or non-belief memories. And in the poem of Li Bai, some central elements are that he talks about memory for time, which you're interested in as well. He talks about the fallibility of memory as well, all elements central to your thesis. And maybe Li Bai might have been captivated a long time ago with issues such as memory distrust. Well, considering the fact that what you have noted, that memory is really a complex entity, your contribution to the memory field is truly amazing, and I want to highlight several ones. many of the persons who are present here already noted that you managed to conduct a huge variety of studies and publish them in very good, high-quality journals. And if you look at your CV, you can see that at this early career stage, you already published more than 20 papers as a first and co-author as well. I have to say, of course, quantity does not mean quality, doesn't say everything, but I do want to make sure also to the rest that you put and place high demands on your own work. You use as much as possible open science principles, you use registered reports, pre-registration. It shows that apart from the quantity, you find the methodology and quality very important. And second, apart from all of this amazing work, you are really the first, I would say, in the area of memory to have identified an important individual contributor to the formation of non-belief memories. I mean, many researchers, like, unfortunately, the late Alan Scoboria, have speculated about possible individual variables, but you are really the first one showing that memory distrust might play an important role to decide whether mental representations refer to memory or not. I think this is really amazing and is a very good and huge contribution to our field. Another amazing fact, Yikang, is that you are on a Chinese Science Council scholarship, and maybe some of the people here are as well, which lasts for about 3 years. However, after 3 years, you told Marco and me that you already want to complete your PhD. I mean, most of us want to go the entire 4 years, but you said, nah, I mean, I have enough now. What should I do? I mean, I can write my PhD thesis. All the planned studies were conducted, almost all were published, and I think it's certainly unbelievable that you succeeded to complete your PhD in about 3 years while you had 1 year left of scholarship. And this is certainly even more outstanding because you're not, as many have also noted, you've not only published research concerning your PhD project, but also published on many other topics, right? Biases in investigative interviewing, relations between mating and reproductive success. It's a really outstanding achievement. And finally, your great accomplishments have not gone unnoticed. When you were finalizing your PhD dissertation, you also looked for possible future positions somewhere else to strengthen your CV and international experience. And of course, oftentimes looking for new jobs is a huge challenge, but your CV, but also I think you as a person, led to a quick success. You applied for a postdoc position at the prestigious Max Planck Institute in Freiburg to engage in research with a more chronological perspective. And I'm very proud to say that they offered you a position. Of course, I'm also a bit sad because you will leave us a little bit. We have to miss you. But of course, I'm sure you will do fantastic over there. We will continue with our collaborations. Like I said, there will not be enough words to describe what a great person you are. However, I mean, I can say a lot about your achievements in terms of science, but I want to end with something that I find more important, and I find it very valuable that my colleague, Dr. Sagana, said something related to this. I already stated that you received a Chinese Science Scholarship, right? So for those who do not know, this is a scholarship in which you receive PhD funding for 4 years. Your co-supervisor, Dr. Wang, online, was the first PhD student at FPN having this CSC scholarship. You have PhD funding for 4 years. However, you are at the forefront, I have to say, of noting that at Maastricht University and also other universities, PhD students with this scholarship are often not treated equally as other PhD students. For example, you told me that PhD students with this scholarship had to pay money to follow PhD courses, which are free for other PhD students. You also noted that some PhD students with this scholarship don't even receive Christmas presents from the university, while it is the case for other PhD students. And you also told me that while you do not have to do teaching, people with this scholarship do not have to do teaching, sometimes these PhD students have to teach, but do not receive any extra payment for this teaching, while this does happen for other PhD students. And since the scholarship only covers living expenses, it is clear that you and other PhD students with the scholarship encounter great challenges to do this here in this country. And I'm very proud that you have been and are in contact with the director of the graduate program of FPN, who is also here, and also other colleagues at UM, and becoming a true, I would say, ambassador for these Chinese PhD students. And your involvement has really paid off, I think. Not perfectly, but it has paid off. Things are already changing for the positive. Discussions are still ongoing on making sure that all PhD students, including those with a CSC scholarship, have equal possibilities at this university and other university. And I think this is something you can be truly proud of yourself, apart from the amazing research that you do. I mean, as you can see, this audacity led to a beautiful retrieval of memories that I have, and I hope, just as Li Bai stated, that you will continue to travel many paths in the future, and that we can share our memories in the future. Congratulations.
Dear Dr. Zhang, also on behalf of Maastricht University, I congratulate you with the degree you just acquired. And before I close this ceremony, I would like to give the opportunity to your co-supervisor, Dr. Jane Wang from China, to say a few words to you.
Dr. Yikang, huge congratulations. I still have memories that we first met in the East Normal University in Shanghai to discuss the possibility of your PhD project. And I can't believe that you achieved your PhD in 3 years. So I'm so proud of you. And you are my first PhD that I co-supervised. So I believe my memories of today will long last in my later years. So I wish you all the best in your future.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now it's time to celebrate. First, we're going to take some pictures, and I would like to ask the audience to wait in the central hall with the stairs, and then we come over to you and you can congratulate the new doctor. And herewith, I close this academic ceremony.
Sorry, if I may have your intention, the reception will now be in aula. Instead, it will be in law faculty. So probably everyone can follow our fellow from law faculty to the place of reception. Diana there, yes, and Xiaoli there. Please follow them. Thank you.